CHCH television system, this is Newsroom, late edition.
I'm Dan McLean. Good evening, everyone. There was some dramatic new testimony at the Grange hearing today. The Grange Commission is looking into mysterious baby deaths at the hospital for sick children.
The Commission's proceedings paused this morning as all the parties involved moved to a nearby courtroom. Lawyers representing the Ontario Nurses Association won permission from a Supreme Court justice to appeal a ruling 3 weeks ago that permits Justice Sam Grange to name individuals he believes may be involved in the infant deaths. With the permission granted, the Commission resumed this afternoon. On the witness stand, another senior supervisor from the hospital, Kathy COULSEN. Under examination by Commission counsel Paul Lamech, COULSEN became the second nurse to reveal that she questioned whether Susan Nellis was responsible for the infant deaths when she was charged with 4 murders.
Whom did you think might be involved? Whom did you say to Mrs. Johnston you thought might be involved on that basis?
Can I answer that now? Phyllis Traynor.
Did Mrs. Johnston agree with you?
No, she said Susan Nellis.
And your response to her suggestion was what?
Susan wasn't there for when Lombardo died.
COULSEN added that she too had passed her doubts along to police.
When I gave a statement to the police, I told them that I found it difficult to believe that Susan could have done it and that she hadn't been there for some of the deaths.
In the second half of his inquiry, Grange will examine the police investigation, deciding whether the questions raised today by COULSEN were ignored by homicide investigators. In Toronto, this is Dan Rath reporting.
A Quebec coroner has ruled that 3 policemen in Sherbrooke, Quebec are responsible for the death of an innocent man during a police raid just before Christmas. The ruling came tonight after 3 days of testimony at an inquest last week. The 3 policemen blasted their way into a motel room, killing an innocent man and injuring another. At the time, police thought they were on the trail of 2 murder suspects. It was a relatively quiet day in Beirut, but generally there are concerns that it will continue to be a bloodbath. Meanwhile, more and more Allied troops are leaving the area.
The mountain town of Souk El Garb is taking the brunt of the latest fighting in Lebanon. It's the last mountain stronghold of the Lebanese army, and strategically it is of immense importance. If Souk El Garb should fall, Muslim guns could be trained on Babda and the presidential palace still occupied by Amin Gemayel. In Beirut, the multinational peacekeeping force continues to shrink. 1,400 Italian soldiers packed their rucksacks and headed home, leaving behind only a small contingent to guard the Italian embassy. Of all the foreign peacekeepers in Lebanon, the Italians were the most popular. They were based in the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila, where the massacres of 1982 took place. The Italians ran field hospitals and social camps for the refugees. But above all, they provided an organized and neutral force that gave the camp people a sense of security they had never known before. David Weber, NBC News.
Top Ontario Tories gathered in Toronto this day for a policy session that could lay the groundwork for the next provincial election. We get details from Dan Rath.
It happens just twice a year. Top Ontario Conservatives lock themselves in a room for a policy strategy session. At this meeting, nearly 3 years after the last election, the tone has grown serious. There is work to be done by everyone: the Premier, the up-and-coming members, the dozens of caucus faithful. It's no secret why the Conservatives are working so hard here. This could well be their last major policy meeting before a provincial election. A look at the guest list shows how serious the Tories are. Here's federal pollster Alan Gregg conferring with top Davis advisor Norm Atkins. And top cabinet ministers are revealing that they, too, are election conscious. Treasurer Larry Grossman is preparing a crucial budget. If it's the last one before an election, it will leave a lasting impression with voters.
The public really isn't accepting token gestures in budgets or any policy, that the public is cynical about, improperly cynical about short-term measures, improperly cynical about things that are put up just to show the public that you can spend a lot of their money very quickly.
The Ontario legislature has sprouted rumors in recent weeks that many Toronto Tories are worried about their ridings, uncertain that the party's grip on power will hold. Davis remains secretive about how the party is dealing with that worry.
Some of the Toronto members have expressed some concern about the possible redistribution. That is not going to be discussed here.
In spite of the way some Tories are talking, and in spite of the impressive list of power brokers and planners gathered here today, the official party line remains there will not be an election called this spring or summer. In Toronto, this is Dan Rath reporting.
It's a magazine that tells people how to find jobs, and it's receiving financial help from the federal government. The opposition criticized the Liberals today for not doing enough to combat the country's #1 problem. Ken Lawrence has more.
Jobs Canada is a new magazine being sent out free of charge to 2.6 million Canadian homes, telling citizens that there is work out there if you look hard enough. The 32-page magazine, published by a non-profit organization, has received a large portion of its funds from the federal government, which has purchased 4.5 pages of advertising. The Ontario government bought another page. Employment Minister John Roberts denies the magazine is a mouthpiece for the government, despite the fact the publishers cleared all articles with Ottawa.
The publication does bring together very useful information for young people and others who are seeking employment opportunities, who are seeking to know what services the Government of Canada provides to assist them in their search for jobs.
Meanwhile, NDP House Leader Ian Deans went after Finance Minister Marc Lalonde on behalf of unemployed steelworkers in his hometown of Hamilton.
These people don't qualify for the government's recently announced new RRSP program. They don't qualify for the reduction in income tax that will the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, and the consultants qualify for, down to 15%. In fact, they don't even qualify for unemployment insurance.
I have indicated that there are a number of programs and expenditures by the federal government in terms of direct job creation and in terms of additional expenditure by the federal government to the tune of over $525 million more than last year.
And we'll give the final word to Tory finance critic John Crosby.
You cannot get blood from a turnip, and you can't get an answer from one either.
Ken Lawrence on Parliament Hill.
The melting snow has unveiled a new development in last week's murder in BINBROOK. Police say they have found $100,000 worth of hash oil outside the victim's home. 26-year-old Frank Lightheart was killed by a shotgun blast. Investigators now believe Lightheart either surprised his assailants or they were waiting to ambush him. A homeowners lobby group got what they fought for at a Hamilton City Council committee meeting tonight. The ratepayers managed to steer truck traffic away from their homes. Here's Michael Kruzank.
Most of Britannia Avenue in Hamilton's East End Normanhurst neighborhood is residential. However, from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, the roadway is a truck route. Impossible and unacceptable, said about a dozen homeowners at a City Transport and Environment Committee meeting tonight. Among them, Michael SEMKOWICZ.
Cars are speeding, you know, like I would say highway, because as well, it's not really protected by police or anything.
The Transport Committee accepted the proposed change for Britannia Avenue. However, there could be objections from ratepayers on other streets that absorb the traffic. St. Anne's Church at Barton and Sherman will lose part of its corner lot to accommodate the change on Britannia. Unexpected benefactors of the Britannia Avenue Citizens' Action are residents along this stretch of Gage Avenue between Barton and Cannon Streets. Up to now, they've lived on a full-time truck route. But recommendations tonight made expedient a further recommendation that this section of roadway be downgraded from a full-time to a part-time truck route. In Hamilton, Michael Kruzank, TV 11 Newsroom.
Tenants say the conditions are intolerable. The region's public health unit agrees and plans on laying charges against the owner of 2 Hamilton apartment buildings. Details from Mike Murphy.
For the past 3 weeks, Wendy Atwater has had to heat water on the stove if she wants to have a bath or cook a meal. Since January 31st, there has been no hot running water at the apartment Wendy shares with her teenage sister and her mother. That's even though they've continued to pay the rent of over $300 a month.
We talked to the superintendent, and he says he can't do anything about it.
The Atwaters have an apartment in one of these 2 buildings on Mohawk Road East. All the tenants have been without hot water this month, and some have been without heat. For Wendy Atwater, it's an inconvenience. It takes 3 hours to get enough water for a hot bath, then the family must take turns bathing. But for the tenants with children, it's more troublesome. This infant is 2 months old. Her mother must cope with an often unheated apartment and cold water.
Kids are all well looked after, but the building ain't.
Realtor Jack Harvey said today the buildings were sold last Wednesday. He would not name either the buyer or the previous owner, but said the buildings have been devastated by unruly tenants. Many are on welfare, he says, and have vandalized the property. The Director of Inspections for the Public Health Unit revealed today that the health unit has stepped in to buy heating oil for the building, although he would not reveal how much money has been spent for fear of embarrassing the owner. He also said that there is a bylaw stating that each building must have hot water, and at the present time, the health unit is preparing charges against the owner. In Hamilton, this is Mike Murphy reporting.
Revenue Minister Pierre Boussières has confirmed an official in Toronto's tax department bought $50 dinners for auditors who brought in the most tax dollars each month. But Boussières says it was not an official incentive. The chief auditor paid for the meals out of his own pocket. Tory Chris Spire calls the practice disgraceful. He says it smacks of bounty hunting.